What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 57 of the Halving Report podcast with myself, your host, Brad Mines. The price of Bitcoin is $37,000 US, and there are 830 days left until the next Bitcoin halving. Markets have been very shaky as of late, but Bitcoin fundamentals look strong as hash rate continues to hit new all-time highs. Some of you may be familiar with the controversial cryptocurrency named HEX and its founder, Richard Hart. Furthermore, Richard Hart is the lead on another upcoming project release entitled PulseX. The project claims to have almost $1 billion, quote-unquote, sacrificed to the project so far. It is very timely that we have Tom Gillespie on the show today. Tom is a disgruntled ScooterCoin investor, a producer of crypto film The FakeFluencer. He is currently investigating HEX, PulseX, and their founder, Richard Hart. So let's get right to it. Good morning, Tom, or good afternoon for you. We're in different time zones today. I appreciate you coming on to the Halving Report podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. Much appreciated. Really appreciate the opportunity. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, lots to discuss. You're working on some pretty interesting stuff. So I wonder if we could just start with an introduction for yourself, if you don't mind, maybe your early life and how you became a crypto investigator.
Yeah, so my story starts basically back in end of 2018, early 2019. I was looking, it was brought to my attention by my younger brother, a cryptocurrency called ScooterCoin. And at that time, there was a young influencer guy called Bitman360, who my brother's son had become quite enthralled with. And I had a small team look at the project and what he was developing or planning to develop. And, it looked pretty legitimate. There was a scooter, it was a hardware device that attached to a scooter, these, what the kids used at the skate parks. And that was like a mining device through kinetic energy. And this is how new scooter coins came into existence. So I thought, that was pretty innovative way to introduce new scooter coins into that economy, if you like, because kids are down there doing their thing anyway, and now they can get kind of paid in a way to do what they love doing. So I went ahead and I invested quite heavily with my brother in that, and that didn't pan out as I'd hoped. And when I looked a little bit further behind the guy who launched or had attempted to launch that currency, I sort of unearthed a world of mishaps and what I refer to as fake influence. And that resulted in my first investigation documentary, The FakeFluencer, which was based around this investigation into this cryptocurrency. And then going on from there, I met, a lot of people in the space, and one of those persons that I interviewed along the way was Richard Hart, who had a lot to say. There's a two-part interview on my YouTube channel with Richard, and he kind of stuck in the back of my mind as I continued through that investigation. And when that documentary went live, production was looking for the next investigation, the next film. And so we put a little vote out, and Hex won. The Hexicans came in and voted the shit out of that, basically, and they won it. So hence what put me on my investigation, my journey right now. I'm about 5 months into it. Should conclude in about, because I have a method where I try the product of which I'm investigating, and I staked HEX, which is it's a thing that these Hexicans do. They basically they buy some HEX and they lock it up for a period. And my HEX stake ends in September. So there's a few more months left in it, and whether the film comes out before or after that stake ends is still to be determined.
Okay. Now, just jumping back to ScooterCoin a little bit. So what were the final results that you found of the main influencer? I forget what you said, Bitman360 or something like that. Like, was he caught? Was he, charged in any manner?
He actually has not been charged to date with any criminal activity, although proceedings are somewhat ongoing there. I am obviously trying to recoup my losses with the kind of energy and enthusiasm one can have in an economy such as crypto, where there doesn't seem to be a great deal of knowledgeable people on how to pursue such things, and also regulatory framework is lacking. So Bitman's still out there doing his thing. From what I've seen online, he spends a lot of time in virtual reality now, so he's somewhat manifested himself in a different reality from the one in which I'm pursuing him. So that adds another layer of complexity to trying to, you know, recoup my losses for me and my family. So yeah, he's still out there, he's still doing his thing. And you know, sometimes it's better to try to learn from your mistakes. And I'm not going to say that we have become friends, but he certainly passes me information about specifically about my current investigation into HEX. He is somewhat involved in that community, and so yeah, he's you know, you keep your enemies close if you can, and you try to learn from previous mistakes. But essentially he's gotten away with it, and honestly, he's not the first and probably won't be the last.
So if you don't mind me asking, like, how long have you been in crypto, and, you know, when did your investment into Scooter, where did that fall on that timeline?
Yeah, so that was the end of 2018 when I heard about it. It was early 2019 when I came into it. So it's all heavily documented on the timeline in the first documentary there. So, but I mean, so that's going back a couple of years now. It's been an intense, long and arduous journey, but I think what's been most confusing is the pace in which this technology evolves, right? So in the few years that I've been present, we've seen this NFT stuff happening. We've seen these DeFi protocols, where again, they're often based on this staking mechanism where you're locking up tokens. Honestly, it's difficult to get your head around, and a lot of these flash in the pan kind of projects. I'm thinking of this this one recently that was based on a Netflix show, and it was heavily promoted by like the likes of the BBC and what have you. And it turned out to be it's turned out to be what's referred to as a rug pull. So I think it's called SquidCoin or something.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and so this story repeats itself, and I'm, my LinkedIn and my Twitter inboxes are full of people asking me to come and have a look at this, come and have a look at this, what's going on here. And, I'm backed up to the wall. I could probably make another 10 to 15 investigation documentaries already. So it's just a question of which ones to go after, which ones are worthy of my attention, because you don't want to be repeating the same story over and over again. What's learnt in one investigation can be extrapolated out to any other future project. And often you're dealing with young people, I've noticed as well. There's a lot of young folk in their 20s, hoping to get rich and roll dolo, but they don't have a bloody clue of the sort of fundamental game theory associated with these projects, and what Richard refers to as the pumpamentals, and others such as Eric Wall, who I've interviewed with, refer to as Ponzi-nomics. So no, it's a steep learning curve, mate. And I'm happy that I'm positioned as I am to be able to share my experiences. And like I say, I think it's very easy to go and point at a project and a number of people I've interviewed for this current investigation have pointed at HEX and said, it's a scam, it's a scam. Back off, don't touch it. Now, that's easy to do, but I've looked hard and long for victims, and I haven't been able to find any victims of such a scam yet. That's not to say it won't happen in the future, but it's just, I think it's better to, okay, let's have a look. Let's try this product. Let's see. You know, I'm not staked like many of the others who stake for 555, which is like 15 years. I'm not going to commit to 15 years, but I've committed to a year. So we'll see how that comes out in September. So far, it's not looking very good at all. I'm down about 60%.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just looking at the HEX market here in the past year or so, and it topped out at what, 48 cents or so back in August last year, September.
That's exactly when I entered. Yes.
Yeah. So, but I mean, if you go back further than that, I mean, it's certainly made some wild gains, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, if you've consumed as much of Richard Hart's content as I have, you'll realize that he's in it for the long game. You know, everything's about very, very just holding and locking up and relying on time, essentially. And what he's done with HEX, from my research, he's apparently minted over 3,000 millionaires using that currency. And like you mentioned before, he's about to do Pulse chain, and I'm assuming he's going to do exactly the same thing again. Rinse and repeat.
Yeah, well, I can definitely resonate with you. When I first entered crypto, I got into a bunch of projects that, you know, were rug pulls, just like you said, and you know, it made me more of a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm not 100% there, but you know, I'm heavily allocated in that asset. You know, we've mentioned HEX and Richard Hart a few times. Like I said, my listeners are probably just mostly Bitcoin people, just people learning about the space for the first time. Can you give us just an introduction of what is HEX?
Yeah, sure. So HEX is, in its current form, is an ERC20 token on the Ethereum blockchain. And there was a sacrifice phase back in 2017 or 18. I think it might have been 18. And, you know, like a load of people threw a lot of tokens or sacrificed a lot of other tokens and coins to basically populate this HEX token with some perceived value, as far as I can tell. I don't want to give too much away about who I've been speaking to, but I did get to speak to one of the lead devs on that project at the time of launch, who went on to leave the project just before it launched because he didn't feel very comfortable with the way that the origin address handled the sacrifice phase. However, like I said before, that went on to mint, allegedly, a lot of whales, they call themselves, or god whales or what have you. And I think what happened is the HEX token launched, and all those people that were, you know, very heavy into HEX immediately sort of saw massive gains and made their way to the exit and enjoyed those early profits. And from there, they spent probably a lot of those profits on onboarding new Hexicans, is what they refer themselves to. But yeah, essentially it's a smart contract. Is what the staking component is smart contract that basically you throw your HEX in there and you lock it up. They try to get you to lock it up for as long as possible. And there's a thing where they always go on about 5555, where, you know, 15 years to commit your HEX to some godforsaken long-term visionary ideology that Richard has instilled in them. And like I say, I've been hanging out on Twitter mainly on Twitter with the Hexicans for a good 4 or 5 months now, and there is a religiosity to the Hexican culture that is it's repeated amongst numerous other projects, longer term projects. Of course, you get these fleeting rug pull projects like the one with the Squid Games that probably lasted a month, might even be still. I think it's probably still online, but these that go on for years and years. They have to build this culture and this community. They give them titles, God whales, Hexicans, first class stakers or whatever. This serves to sort of bring those investors, speculators further down the rabbit hole that is HEX. And then obviously right now what he's doing with Pulse, he's going to sort of recycle that cultural sort of momentum that he's built in HEX and roll it into Pulse chain, which is a fork, not a fork, but well, I guess it's a kind of fork of Ethereum. Although there's some misinformation around that, because some people say it's a fork of Binance chain. So I still haven't got to the bottom of whether he's forking Binance chain or Ethereum or making some hybrid thing.
Mm-hmm. From what I read, it's supposed to be an Ethereum fork. But you've mentioned Richard a few times, and carrying over this momentum, recycling this momentum he's carried on from HEX. I know you've spoken to him quite a bit, from my understanding. Who is Richard Hart, and is he a controversial figure? If so, why?
He is arguably the most hated figure in crypto, and that goes back, from what I've understood, it goes back to his earlier days as also a Bitcoin maxi that turned his back on that community to launch HEX, which was originally called Bitcoin HEX. And those of your community that have been around, those of your listeners that have been around long enough will probably remember that some of the websites are actually still up in the old Wayback Machine. You can see them still. And so, yeah, I think what he's done when he hijacked the Bitcoin brand essentially and called this thing Bitcoin HEX in the early days, I think he pissed off a lot of people, made a lot of enemies, and he did that, from what I've come to understand, is because he could, and that's why he did it. There was a fork of Bitcoin called Bitcoin Cash, and I think he was heavily inspired by what happened with Bitcoin Cash to go on and create Bitcoin HEX at that time. So yeah, he is a controversial figure since that point. That would have been back in 2017, I think. Since that moment, he basically made a lot of enemies in the crypto space, and then went on to navigate further away from the origins of crypto towards this kind of benevolent dictator character that he's been developing through the Richard Hart live streams that can go on for many, many hours.
Why did you say that you think he was influenced by the Bitcoin Cash fork?
Because I've interviewed over 40 persons now for this investigation, and there is a recurring theme around the timing, and some of the people that were close to him suggested that was the case. So again, I don't want to give too much away for the film just now, but I can tell you I've got some pretty explosive material on the hard drives there.
Well, I appreciate you giving us what you are today here, Tom. And when I visited the Hex, I think I claimed my free Hex a long time ago. I haven't checked it or what it's doing. I just did it because it doesn't cost you anything, right? When you just claim your Bitcoin free Hex. But when I went to the website, it does seem awfully scammy. Why is it that Richard promotes Hex in this manner? If it's not a scam and it's so legitimate, why does he use these maybe pumpamentals? Like it just comes off so scammy, right? Like, does it not when you first go to the website? I don't know what it looks like anymore, but when I first initially went to the website, it just came off that way. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of very, very big promises splashed across that website, and a number of, a number of people also have suggested that he is using the scam terminology and all that orbits around it as a strategic marketing advantage. And I think that's pretty typical of Richard, to be able to take something like that is typically a negative and spin it in a way that presents him and his project as a positive. And so when I reached out to him in 2019 for the interview about the FakeFluencer, I spoke to him for a good hour and a half or 2 hours there. And when I pinged him that first time on Telegram, I said, I want to talk about the crypto scamdemic, making a documentary. He was like, I'll talk about the crypto scamdemic for hours, mate. So, he even sent me 4K footage of him in his den there afterwards to use in the film. And I think he's figured out a way to use the scam narrative in crypto to his advantage. And what it does actually is it's a little bit like this, all publicity is good publicity. Like, people need to be taught, like, as long as they're talking about you, he couldn't give a shit what they're saying. They just need to keep talking about it. And I think that's what sort of elevated him to this sort of level of attention that he has. That said, I was recently in Miami at a decentralization conference, and I did about 20 interviews there as well. Not one person had heard of him. And these are people in his area, in his ballpark. I would have expected at least one person. There was nobody, which was a bit revealing. So it tells me that while you can look at the HEX origin address on Etherscan and you can see, okay, there's 250,000 hodlers. When it comes to brass tacks, there's probably not more than a few thousand who are actually sort of somewhat active on the monthly, and then a few hundred who are active on the daily. So it's quite a small community from what I've seen, although it's, it likes to pretend that it's larger than it is. I've noticed as well that a lot of the Hexicans post about scam related stuff. So they want to present themselves as crime fighters as well, piggybacking on that idea that, we see all the scams, we can identify all the scams, but we are the good guys, we got your back. And it's part of the online storytelling that a lot of these, bottom-up communities like to propagate. And I think HEX, whether Richard continues to be the head of HEX, he doesn't call himself a leader, he calls himself a cheerleader. But at the end of the day, if he goes away, I think that really would heavily impact the sort of ongoing enthusiasm for HEX, to be honest, because I've interviewed a ton of Hexicans and I've spoken to a ton of them on Twitter, and the first words out of their mouth are always Richard Hart, not HEX. So I think he plays an integral role going forward. So,
and that's my concern too. It just gives a bigger aspect of centralization when you have one person being able to control the community or the coin so much. But I mean, I guess time will tell, and if Hex pays off. Now I can see you can search Hex on CoinMarketCap, but it doesn't rank, does it, in comparison to other coins?
Yeah, so I think a few months back, there was a debacle around the ranking of Hex on both CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko, and also Nomics. The CEO of Nomics put out a big article on why he had adjusted Hex down from like third place to 230 or whatever. And there was a big, uproar amongst the Hexicans. Actually, one of them, or a group of them, have started a legal proceedings against Binance, the operators of CoinMarketCap. I'm still following that, but I'm not sure exactly the current status. And yeah, I mean, this comes back to the idea that what the fuck is the origin address up to? There was 90% of the circulation sitting there, and I think these aggregator sites had just been like, they'd had a look and they'd be like, no, there's something smells off here. And they adjusted accordingly. And I think what it did reveal, that it should have been bigger news than it actually was, because it revealed how easy it is to manipulate the market cap in this crypto economy. It may come across as decentralized and open source and democratic and blah blah blah, but if you're not able to really look under the hood, which most younger or people without the time or attention spans to look under the hood, they often will get wrapped up. But the irony is, it's the older crowd, the more sophisticated crypto investigator, if you like, or speculator. They can look at that and they can still participate, because they can see, okay, if that's the game theory, then I know what my exit strategy is, and I'll play along accordingly. And I think that's what's happening with Hex. You've got a generation, an older, slightly older generation that understand the mechanics of the system, and they are willfully onboarding younger folk who just see, money, dollar signs in the sky in the future. So it's kind of, it's this pumpermental stuff that Richard has become so famous for. I think he even coined the term.
Now, witnessing so many scams firsthand and being a victim of that ScooterCoin, has this made you any more of a Bitcoin maximalist at all? Or like, how are you in terms of allocation? I know you said you put money into the projects that you're investigating, but is that where your investment lies, in the cryptocurrency space, or how do you see that?
Yeah, so obviously I work with production BitJoin Studios, so they give me some allocation and instructions on that kind of stuff. I'm not a crypto guy. I'm still like 1 foot in the traditional economy, 1 foot in the crypto economy. I like to keep myself sort of agnostic in that regard. That said, I have come to understand that there are infrastructure investment opportunities. So the likes of Ethereum and Bitcoin are they're infrastructures. They are, Bitcoin is not a substitute for cash transactions, but it's very, very possible it's going to be a substitute for gold. So I think the digital gold analogy works well for Bitcoin, and also a sort of lender of last resort, if you like. With Ethereum, I think you've got this very what appears to be a very robust infrastructure for these DeFi protocols and the emerging NFT stuff as well. So I think Bitcoin and Ethereum are going to be around regardless. Those other projects beyond there, you have to have a little bit of a tech savviness about you that allows you to go in again and have a look at the design, the game theory, the mechanics of the system, to be able to sort of appreciate what's happening with your investments. Whereas I think Bitcoin and Ethereum are quite simple to understand on the surface. A lot of these other products that are being built upon, well, there's not so many products being built upon Bitcoin as far as I can see, or apart from these kind of layers, layer 2 or layer. I haven't been following it so much, but I understand that it's a kind of a heavy, sluggish network. It's not as malleable or flexible as Ethereum for launching certain products, but they both complement one another. And then so when you get Pulse Chain, Richard launching Pulse Chain sometime in the near future, he's actually, from what I understood he's cut the transaction costs, although, I'm not sure that that's such a big deal, as so many of these these projects on Ethereum are centralized as far as I can tell. So a lot of the transactions are done off chain anyway. So the user doesn't assume the costs, but whatever. He thinks he's going to cut the costs of transactions on chain. And also he's carbon copying every single DeFi protocol and NFT over to this chain as well, which I think is ballsy, and also, quite again, I can't help but think it's a marketing strategy more than anything.
And has PulseX attracted much interest?
Yeah, I mean, the PulseX sacrifice, of which I partaked in, I think last time I looked, they were just under $1 billion, primarily in HEX, funny enough. I think HEX HEX is at the top. You can go to pulsex.com and you can see what's been sacrificed there. It was just under $1 billion last time I looked. And so again, you can see the leaderboard and all that kind of stuff there as well. But honestly, mate, I think there's a group at the top of the pyramid who are shifting all this assumed value that's been created in HEX into this PulseX. And I think, it's going to be potentially disastrous for those people that are staked in HEX long term, because of course they will have a carbon copy on Pulse chain. They'll have something called PHEX, which is all fine and dandy, but those people, again, that are left behind or are not up to date or don't have a clue how to move their shit from one blockchain to another, they're going to be left behind, and they'll probably miss the window of opportunity, of which Richard has designed intentionally to be, short. So again, it's difficult to say how many people are actually contributing or sacrificing to this PulseX launch, because there's so much sort of misinformation online. I mean, one guy can manage 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 addresses themselves, right? And make it seem like, hey, look at this. We've got a great deal of enthusiasm from, 100,000, 2 million people do this. When really it's just a guy with a sophisticated computer spitting out nonsense. And you need some pretty sophisticated equipment or analysis software to be able to figure this stuff out. And there are companies out there that do exactly that. And I'm actually in talks with a couple of them, hoping to get some interviews with the actual guys that, have the superpowers to be able to diagnose some of these strange behaviors in the crypto economy, of which there is plenty.
No doubt about that. Can you tell me a little bit your documentary that you're making?
Yeah, so it's called Hexicans and the Time Value of Money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I wanted to combine the HEX value proposition with the community. I think community is such an interesting phenomenon in crypto because a lot of people in crypto talk about community, and I think it's not the right usage of the term actually, because from where I'm sitting, community used to be local, like it used to be geographically localized, and people used to look out for each other and what have you. But the communities that exist in crypto are a lot more geared towards defensive tribalism of a token's value, essentially. And on top of that, pumping the value. Now that can happen at a certain scale, but I think as soon as that community becomes too large, orchestrating certain events in the markets becomes more difficult. So I think Bitcoin, probably Ethereum, those tokens, those assets have gone past that stage now, where that's not to say there isn't a group of Bitcoin whales out there that can move mountains if they want to. I think it's just probably a little bit more easier to identify, especially with some of the analysis tools that exist today. But smaller communities like HEX, of which I'm investigating, I think there's a pyramid-esque type construction where you've got King Richard at the top, and then you've got these god whales that he's anointed just below him. And then just below them, there's these kind of, hyper enthusiastic tweeters that don't stop all day, all night long. And they also are running ads. The number of family and friends members that have contacted me in the last few months saying, hey, I just saw an ad for HEX here. I just saw an ad there. Yeah, it's because there's an army of people putting ads out everywhere. And then, below those guys, there's sort of the broader community, those people that have become indoctrinated by the higher tier level into this more long-term visionary ideology associated with staking HEX and, becoming financially independent, et cetera, et cetera. So as with the levels of sort of comprehension on how the system works, so does the sort of ideology sort of peter down and out. Now, that's only sustainable for so long, I'd say. My investigation with this can't go on for 15 years. Honestly, 5 months in, and I feel like I've got all the material I need to actually start post-producing this thing and just get it out the door and move on to the next one, because I could easily get wrapped up in Richard's, ever evolving projects into the near future. That said, I'm in a bit of a unique position in the fact that I am both staked and I sacrificed. Of course, that was on behalf of the production to sort of add an extra layer or an extra dimension to my investigation, of which usually doesn't occur, but I'm skeptical on how both of those are going to turn out. But, I'm happy to come out of this with an extra couple of bucks in the production account for the next investigation.
You mentioned the HEX community having this religious sentiment. Is that any different than any other cryptocurrencies? I'm almost finding competing cryptocurrencies are like a religion, and they repeat this mantra within each community, and Bitcoin is just the biggest religion cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels. As Bitcoin has a figurehead in Satoshi Nakamoto, and if you listen to the Hexicans, they often reference Satoshi as this pussy that ran off and didn't want to sort of man up and take control of what he'd created. Whereas Richard, you know, he stuck around. He's very proud of his creation, etc., etc. Although arguably he's not so proud that he would claim ownership of the origin address. So yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels. Again, it comes back to these groups of people. They like to sort of birds of a feather flock together, you know. But I think with Bitcoiners, the Bitcoin maxis, I think are, you know, they're a small but dedicated group, and they're probably comprised of early adopters, which means they're, you know, whales to a certain extent. Now, if they organize in a back room at some shady gentleman's club to do as they please with the market, again, that would make for an interesting investigation. Although, I think the behavior that happens within the Bitcoin community, the Ether, HEX, it's similar. It is. There's a lot of crossover. It's just a question of how dispersed the community is, and how and the size of it. Again, I think when it gets to a certain size, it becomes harder and harder to sort of easily manipulate the price. That said, depending on who's holding the maximum, the amount, the majority of the coins. I think I read the other day one of the arguments from HEX about the rug pull counter arguments was is it Michael Saylor, who owns what is it? I think him and the Winklevoss twins together own a large percentage of all the Bitcoins currently in circulation. They could easily move the market if they did this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. So
I think the Winklevoss, I think, own about 1%, and then Michael Saylor, I think last September I read it was 0.058, but I know he's been making buys since then. So Michael Saylor is probably close to 1% as well. But these are guys that claim to hodl and never plan on selling in the near future.
Yeah, and the same thing I hear from Richard about the origin address, right? They're supposed to never sell and never stake. So there's a lot of parallels to be drawn. But again, I think Bitcoin has proven itself over time to be a substantial, infrastructure for the entire crypto economy. Not just, it's not just another token that people are speculating on short term to enrich themselves. It seems like it's become more of a sort of on-ramp or foundation for this new crypto economy. And I think in that regard, it's not going to go away. And not to mention that, the way that the halving, cutting the supply in half every 4 years, and the difficulty adjustments and all these other sort of baked in mechanics of it suggests that, it's quite a sophisticated design that this Satoshi character has left us with. Now, that doesn't mean everything's going to go swimmingly, of course. Mm-hmm. Arguably, I've been following the El Salvador president, El Presidente, over the last few weeks, and he's quite the character. I think Moody's downgraded him, and he was like put out a tweet saying couldn't give a shit kind of thing. So, but I think he's going to have his head's going to roll in the street, because the long arm of the US government won't put up with that shit for much longer, I don't imagine. And that's where the real controversies and drama is going to happen in the near future, I'd imagine.
Well, hopefully a few other nations jump on board before his head rolls in the streets, as you said, because then, when you have more people backing this idea, and he's very popular with American capitalists, right? I would say him, the president of El Salvador, Michael Saylor, probably the two biggest Bitcoiners right now, loudest mo's on Twitter, the kind of where people are following right now. And yeah, it's very risky what he's doing, but often this was predicted by the Bitcoin community that rogue nations would be the first adopters, the people that have most to gain, right? Not the entrenched financial capitalists in America. They have the most to lose, right? By losing all their power and their military power, and being able to kind of influence having that world reserve currency as US dollar is still having that impact right now. But as Bitcoin gains more traction and more nations realize it's a more fair system, transparent, hopefully we see more nations come on board, and Nayib is not alone.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty confident it's not the first nation to try to adopt. Well, didn't Venezuela try to adopt Bitcoin a few years ago?
They didn't make it legal tender like El Salvador has, but I think they made their own PetroCoin, which I haven't really paid attention to lately, but it was supposed to be backed by oil. Now I'm not sure where that is. I haven't looked at anything around that in months, maybe over a year. So, but yeah, I'm pretty sure El Salvador is the first one to actually have it in their law that you must actually take Bitcoin as a business, and it's recognized as a national currency.
What do you imagine would happen if the US government, or a large developed nation, absorbed 20% of the Bitcoin supply?
I think that would be very difficult to do. As soon as one nation started doing it, especially a nation as big as the United States of America, people will start noticing, and then it would be a race. Other nations would start doing it as well. But if they did acquire 20% of the supply, I think that there's still a decentralized structure within Bitcoin between holders, the devs, and the miners that keep this equal amount of power, where because I don't think even if they do hold 20%, they're not going to dump it and then rebuy it. They're just going to keep acquiring, I think, at that point, if they get to that point. And if other nations just see them printing money just to simply buy Bitcoin, well, the US dollar is going to go down pretty quick, I'd imagine. So I don't think it would mean the end for Bitcoin. I think we would see hyper Bitcoinization at that point if America was holding 20% of all Bitcoin, because that's a lot different from what it looks like today. So I would see it as as something that Bitcoin has now become mass adopted.
Yeah, because I've got this feeling like what the US did in Libya, and arguably in Iraq as well. I've got this sort of vision long term that the US will try to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible and then destroy it. And in doing that, they will, drive Bitcoin back to the dark web. So it will just be used for guns and drugs or whatever, where it came from, right? And I think they'll either have to do that, or they'll have to absorb it in a way that is beneficial to them. Because I think China's already they kicked all the miners out last year, I think it was. Russia just banned all crypto activity. So that's leaving the US up. Sooner or later, they're going to have to make a decision, right, on what the hell they're going to do. And I think, again, the smarter people in the room over there would probably try to absorb it and integrate it. Unfortunately, I think you've got a few, conservative types that'll probably prefer to destroy it. But it's going to be an interesting few years regardless.
Yeah. Yeah, I think America's, I think, past the point of being able to ban it. I think there's too much interest, and that interest is spreading through Wall Street. Wall Street has a lot of influence. But when, but there are a few, because Bitcoin's marketed to different people in different ways, right? Like, to an anarchist or a libertarian, you're going to say, highlight those points about Bitcoin that help their cause. But if you market it to Wall Street, you call it an asymmetrical asset, digital asset, right? So it's marketed different ways, and it's so difficult to fully understand Bitcoin when most people aren't computer programmers as is, and it's 31,000 lines of code that crosses amongst different subjects. But I'm hoping we're past the point where America is going to ban it, because obviously the two superpowers is America and then China at this point, and China's already taken that. And although they have banned Bitcoin mining, I think I saw like 20% of Bitcoin mining is still occurring in China. And the beauty of the network, though, is that it incentivizes these miners to go and set up in other countries as soon as possible, where the cheapest energy is. And that's what we've seen. And we've seen Bitcoin hash rate hit new all-time highs. So fundamentals are looking good, in my opinion.
Indeed. Yeah, so I think I got, end of the month, end of February is when this Pulse stuff's supposed to launch. So I'll be all eyes on the prize around that time, because I'll be looking to tell production to get the fuck out of Pulse immediately as soon as it pumps. and that's but purely because of what I've observed in the previous events related to HEX. I think Richard's found a formula that works for him nicely. And again, those people that have the time and energy or enthusiasm to look closely at the sort of game theory associated with such a system are the ones that are going to profit the most. And those are the people that you'll see, talking online excessively. The other day I saw a Twitter Spaces with a bunch of Hexicans. It went on for, I think it went on for like 3 or 4 days or something. They do these extravagant rolling streaming events, and they're really, really hyping it at the moment, because they're looking for rolling this thing out big time. And there's a lot of people getting sucked in, my friends and family included. And I've had to say to them, look, back off. If you don't know what you're looking at, just go and take your time to go and do some homework, and also stop fucking talking to me about HEX. Honestly, I'm 5 months in. I'm tired of it. I'm ready. I'm going to just go ahead and post produce the film now and get it out, I think. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it, Tom. When you're not investigating crypto scams, making documentaries, what else do you like to do?
Oh, mate, mainly I go spend quite a bit of time at a cafe here down in Bondi. A few friends, and I hit the surf, basically try to turn out some styles like as if I was still in my 20s. I'm in my 40s now, but I keep fit, and believe it or not, I even hit the skate park down there, but not on a scooter. My background's in skateboarding. So
Tom, do you have any questions or comments for me? If not, can you tell us where we can follow you, learn more, and watch for your new documentary?
Yeah, mate, I've probably got 100 questions for you, but I wasn't prepared for an interview in that direction, so we might have to reschedule for that. But yeah, you get my latest is at hexdocumentary.com, and my previous is at the FakeFluencer.movie. And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You fucking name it, I'm on it, basically. Right now, I'm actually exploring a few of these decentralized social medias, but I'm not convinced, to be honest. It feels very centralized when I have to make an account and what have you, you know. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but the Twitters is where all the action happens when it comes to the HEX investigation, and LinkedIn as well. A lot of people hit me up on LinkedIn who are, you know, they really would like me to come and investigate this and this project, but I just don't have the time. I've got a lot of focus for HEX and get this one out the door, because yeah, it's going to be a bombshell, I think. So I think Richard's going to enjoy it, though.
No doubt about that. Well, I appreciate your time, Tom. I said I'd have a buddy who's kind of been who made some sacrifice into PulseX. So I'm glad I could talk to you about HEX, Richard Hart, you know, and crossing over to PulseX before the launch. And, you know, I appreciate your macro outlook on this project, because, you know, I've always found it very interesting, but, you know, it's so little time in your life and so much going on in the cryptocurrency space. You don't always get to investigate everything. So I appreciate what you do. I will be in touch, and thanks again for coming on the show, Tom.
Right on. Cheers, mate.
Thank you all for listening to the Halving Report podcast. Please like and subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, check out our show notes below for more about our guests and some sweet crypto coupons, and we'll see you back next time.